What are you looking at me that way for?
Oh! Hey, you big fathead.
What's the big idea?
There was a time when these stars were household names, lighting up the silver screen and shaping the golden age of Hollywood. But behind the fame and fortune lay fragile lives, and many who once had it all ended up with nothing. Today, we remember the forgotten stories of 10 old Hollywood actors who died in poverty or went bankrupt.
There's one of the finest little weenies that ever graced a paper plate.
1. Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi's portrayal of Count Dracula in 1931 became one of the most iconic performances in horror film history. Yet behind the cape and chilling stare was a man typecast into a narrow genre, unable to find work beyond horror. Lugosi's thick Hungarian accent limited his roles in an industry that was quick to discard foreign-sounding actors after their peak. Despite a long career, he was never able to secure high-paying roles outside of horror. His struggles with chronic pain led to morphine addiction, and his declining health made it hard for him to work. He checked himself into a rehabilitation center in the early 1950s, and fans like Frank Sinatra helped pay for his care. When he died in 1956, he was buried in his Dracula costume, as he had wished, but he left behind barely enough money to cover funeral expenses. 2. Judy Garland. America's sweetheart in The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland's life was far from magical. Pushed into show business as a child, she was overworked by MGM and fed pills to stay thin and energetic. Studio executives controlled every aspect of her appearance and lifestyle. Despite making millions throughout her career, she saw little of it due to predatory contracts, mounting debts, and bad financial decisions by those around her. Garland's emotional and physical health deteriorated under constant pressure, and she was forced to keep performing just to stay afloat. By the time of her death in 1969, she had endured 5 marriages and IRS seizures. She died in a rented London apartment with only a few $100s left. 3. Mickey Rooney. One of the highest-paid actors in the world during the 1930s and 40s, Mickey Rooney's career spanned 9 decades and over 300 films. He made an estimated $12 million during his peak years, but he lost most of it through gambling, poor financial planning, and multiple divorces. 8 in total. Rooney also claimed he was a victim of elder abuse in his later years, alleging that his stepson misappropriated his funds and kept him in isolation. Despite receiving honorary awards and accolades late in life, he lived frugally and had to rely on friends and fans for assistance. When he passed away in 2014, his estate was worth just $18,000. He was buried in Hollywood Forever Cemetery, thanks to the generosity of fellow actors and fans. 4. John Barrymore. Known as one of the greatest Shakespearean actors in American history, John Barrymore also starred in several silent and early sound films. Part of the famous Barrymore family dynasty, he was admired for his looks, charm, and theatrical talent. However, Barrymore's personal demons, especially his severe alcoholism, overshadowed his brilliance. His excessive drinking led to erratic behavior on and off stage, and he eventually became uninsurable for film productions. He lost fortunes on failed marriages, poor investments, and his lavish lifestyle. In his final years, he was no longer the dashing leading man, but a frail shadow of his former self. By the time of his death in 1942, he was broke and living in a small Hollywood apartment. 5. Frances Farmer. Frances Farmer was a rising star in the 1930s, known for her intelligence, beauty, and independence, qualities that clashed with Hollywood's rigid studio system. She openly criticized the hypocrisy of the industry and refused to play the game. which made her a target for studio heads. Her mental health deteriorated rapidly, and she was institutionalized in psychiatric hospitals for nearly a decade. During her time in institutions, she was reportedly subjected to electroshock therapy and possibly even a lobotomy, though this remains controversial. Her career never recovered, and she took on odd jobs to survive. She died of esophageal cancer in 1970, far removed from the spotlight she once dominated. 6. Lupe Velez. A fiery Mexican actress known as the Mexican Spitfire, Lupe Velez rose to fame for her beauty, talent, and strong screen presence in comedies and dramas alike. She enjoyed a lavish lifestyle, frequently appearing in the gossip columns for her relationships with prominent men like Gary Cooper. However, her personal life was filled with heartbreak, and her career began to decline in the early 1940s as public tastes changed. Velez became pregnant by actor Harold Ramond, and fearing scandal and isolation, she took her own life in 1944 at the age of 36. Though she had been a major star, she died with more debt than assets, and her death was later misrepresented in pop culture. 7. Jackie Kugan. Famous for starring in Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, Jackie Kugan was one of the first child stars in Hollywood and earned millions by age 10. Unfortunately, his parents spent almost all of his money on luxury items and real estate. When Kugan turned 21 and found his trust fund empty, he sued his mother and stepfather. Although he won a portion back, the case exposed how vulnerable child actors were to exploitation. As a result, California passed the Kugan law to protect young performers. Kugan continued acting, notably playing Uncle Fester in the 1960s TV series The Addams Family. But he never regained the fortune or fame of his youth. He lived modestly and was financially constrained for much of his adult life. 8. Veronica Lake. With her signature peekaboo hairstyle, Veronica Lake became a 1940s film noir icon and sex symbol. Behind the scenes, she struggled with alcoholism and an undiagnosed mental health condition believed to be schizophrenia. Her behavior became unpredictable on set, and her career quickly fell apart. Lake's finances crumbled along with her career, and she spent years moving from town to town, working menial jobs including as a cocktail waitress. And she briefly attempted a comeback with a memoir, but it did little to change her fortunes. She died in 1973 from hepatitis and kidney failure, alone and nearly broke at just 50 years old. 9. W.C. Fields. A brilliant comic actor with a sharp wit and a love for alcohol, W.C. Fields was one of the biggest stars of the 1930s. He made a fortune with his unique brand of humor and became a symbol of early American comedy. But Fields' heavy drinking and eccentric spending habits drained his wealth. He distrusted banks and kept much of his money in cash, which often disappeared. His health declined rapidly due to cirrhosis of the liver and pneumonia. Fields died in 1946, and although his name lived on, his estate was much smaller than expected, given his immense success. 10. Marie Pvost. Once a leading lady of silent film, Marie Pvost transitioned to talkies, but found herself pushed aside by a changing industry that favored newer faces. She had a brief career resurgence in the early 1930s in supporting roles, but her income dwindled. Devastated by the death of her mother, Pvost fell into depression and began drinking heavily. She was often seen begging for roles from producers who once praised her. When she died in 1937, she was so emaciated that rumors circulated about the condition of her body. Her lonely death brought attention to the forgotten stars of the silent era and led to the creation of the Motion Picture and Television Fund. These actors gave the world their talent, their charm, and unforgettable performances. Yet many were abandoned when their moment in the spotlight faded. Their stories remind us that fame is fleeting, and that behind every smile on the silver screen may lie deep personal pain. If this video moved you, please take a moment to like, comment, and share your thoughts. Thanks for watching.